Across the world, there is a subject that will make even the strongest quake: gentrification. For white people, it is a matter of classism and a shifting economy that makes the poor even poorer, of which, what are they supposed to do? Not move into where they can afford? For BIPOC people, the element of racism is undeniable, as you do not hear of BIPOCs running up through Beverly Hills. In essence, sure, white people get poor and have to move, but we do not exactly get richer and move on up to the Upper East Side to a deluxe apartment in the sky. Yet neither side discusses the more important Brutus factor to gentrification: Gentriletty. Mexico City is like a third more favored home to me. New York overwhelms me, while half of Puerto Rico's population is my family, which means I come off underwhelming. Mexico City has always felt like a right blend of both, even though I often get confused for Mexico's most recent batch of immigrants, Colombians and Venezuelans, and can get treated like a bad bunny hopping around, taking jobs while rhythmically shaking my ass. Yet when it comes to finding an apartment, it has its advantages. In being Latina, and from what others deem the poorer parts, I either do not get an offer to sell, or I get the actual price of the product. Yet Gentriletti was relentlessly and notoriously greedy, and the producer had warned me that you had to suck her butt just to get a cheaper price, which he might have literally. And in the BX and BK, gentrification was astronomical and affected everything. The minute a white woman with a baby carriage walked on your street, safety measures were in place, a gallon of milk went up $5, and any sign of Puerto Rican flag or salsa music blasting from a window got a noise complaint. The change of economy literally bred a change of culture and neighborly dynamics. White wealth was colder, quieter, and though their children were warmer and more open to wearing beanies and learning the history of hip hop, you could not shake the feeling that it was some form of fetishizing. And that was the essence of colonization. You either get fetishized enough to survive and be mixed in, or forgotten enough to die and be erased from places that once had your music and flag blasting from its window. Damn it! Even I forgot about Gentriletti. Back to her. In her 60s and paying $400 for a three-bedroom, Leticia was more attached to money than Mexico. Sure, she was born there, but money was always what made sure she could live on Earth. Upon meeting her, you felt she did facials with pesos. She had the ease and elegance of a daddy warbucks. Her generosity measured by whether she fetishized you, and if not, totally and happily forgot about you. I've always been fascinated by the energy of wealth, especially because my father always carried it, even amidst his cons. He looked at money as his mass birthright, even if, and especially if it was yours. In my crossing with certain wealthy people, particularly with his scam energy, they contained his grace and serial killer like cruelty. They saw people as strategies for their wealth and did not mind leaving their financial corpse in the kitchen for someone else to bury. Their deviant numbness fascinated me, as someone raised to feel like everyone's feelings should go before their own. And sometimes I still feel like that. Hence, when Jen Triletti tried to sell me a one bedroom for 40,000 pesos, which was the equivalent of almost $2,500 in doctores, I was insulted, unsurprised, and impressed. If you do not know, doctores is like the absolute Hunts Point of Mexico City. It's like someone offering you a free gang shooting with your iced coffee. Similar to La Pela or certain sections of NYC or LA, if you are from there, you are from there and know what streets and lines to cross. After all, there are families being raised and children playing in everywhere. Humanity is never cut off, even in places where death is allowed to roam more. Yet I have no family in that location, and I'm 6 feet tall. I'm a female giant even in Puerto Rico. Hence, what the hell am I doing in Doctores? I might as well walk with a neon sign over me that says open to crime. I was shook and told Gentriletti that I'm not going to overpay for danger. I already did that with my exes. She was insulted that I caught her ruse, and when she could not convince me that the rise in robberies in the area was really 2 blocks down from my address, she blocked me. Sold it for 50,000 pesos to a Swedish couple that ended up becoming homebodies as a safety precaution. When I told the producer, he said, Told you, you should have been nicer, but I was not a booty eater. Still, the order resonated with a childhood trigger. Before I would dreadfully go out with my father, my mother would tell me, Be nice to him, and maybe he'll be nice to you. It stuck out to me, that order, particularly the maybe. What my mother did not realize is that she was teaching me how to erase my boundaries, especially with men, and how to handle feeling unsafe with someone. My father, when he wanted to impress you, he would, without your need to be nice. But when he hated you, then he destroyed you. and he destroyed us. And being nice did not prevent or lessen the destruction. Gentriletty would single handedly be the pipeline for white people taking over Roma, Doctores, and Condesa. And being nice to her would not make the difference because, like my dad, these are people that would turn on their own people for money. And that is a character flaw that will always benefit a flawed system. So let's discuss. I guess this is a controversial episode. I think gentrification is a little bit different in Mexico because the gentrification is more in terms of country. Like Americans are gentrifying Mexico. And the difference in cultures is astronomical. I mean, first of all, Latinos are known for their cheer, and Americans are known for their depression. And American depression is so funny because American depression stems on this idea that if I consistently talk about how prejudice and poverty is rampant around the world and just drop every historical fact I heard on TikTok, I'm coming off as aware and awakened and charming. And it's extremely draining. And I think that's kind of the resistance that Mexicans are having as well with the rise in gentrification. These are unhappy, wealthy people that really think that because they think they know better about history of their own country, they remotely understand the history of Mexico, the culture of Latinidad, and even respect it. I thought like, I mean, I have an upcoming episode called Gramerson, and Gramerson is this guy who the first time I met him, he's this white balding 45-year-old guy that acts like he's 25, had no success in Canada, and had some remote success in Mexico in terms of business. Because that's how you know colonization still exists. And that's how you know race still matters. If you can be a failure and white in your own country, but successful and white in a brown, in what many might deem a brown country, right? That says something, right? Race does matter. And the first time I met him, he was extremely racist to Latinos and Mexicans and just misogynistic. And he was smashed. And then I met him again when he was sober, and the way he turned it on, it was almost like alcohol freed him to be the devil he was. And I mean, he was doing well. And I think that, and then I had this another situation where this young black woman said that Mexicans had slaves, and actually slaves escaped to Mexico. And she said, you guys should love us more. And she went off, and she too was drunk. So I think that element should be taken in as a factor too. I think a lot of Americans, white BIPOC, are just coming to Mexico City and coming to Latin America because it's cheaper, but they're bringing in their sadness, their demons, their confusion, and they're kind of, the American system does not teach history properly. It doesn't even teach world history properly. It doesn't teach its own history properly. And being aware that you've been improperly educated does not necessarily cure, heal, or wrap up the fact that you are improperly educated. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like knowing that I'm depressed. It's like that person who says I suffer from anxiety and doesn't control it and really expects the entire room to like help her with breathing exercises every 5 seconds. Have you ever met that person? I have. Um I think both are just good examples of kind of this Americans and Canadians, a little more Americans do have this demand, like feed my wounds, feed my ego, and love me while I don't love myself. And it always shows up in the partying. Because that's another thing too, and that's something that I noticed in Puerto Rico. Like Americans would just get absolutely Hulk smash, like beyond drunk, trash the restaurant, trash the beach, and then privatize it. You're like, how the fuck is this Logan Paul heathen the owner of Bayamon? Kill me. Um, and I think it's just Americans. Like I think it goes beyond BIPOC and whiteness. Whereas like you go to places like Brooklyn and the Bronx, and there is like white versus black, white versus BIPOC, and it does share this same essence. Well, I think what I was putting in the beginning was I think the when my area in the BX and then Brooklyn got gentrified, um, I what I always noted was there were a lot the white people moving in were colder, quieter, meaner, and oddly resentful. I think they felt they were downgrading. And when someone goes to your home, it's like if somebody lived in a mansion and they moved to your little apartment. And of course your little apartment is all you've ever known. Um and they're just they can't help but really miss that mansion, and it just shows the energy shifts, the cultural shifts. I mean, I don't know if you, I think his name is, I think it's Bordeaux who talks about, he's this French sociologist that talks about how ghettos are literally aesthetically designed to ignite depression. And, I had railings on my window, like a cage. Why? My building had this weird vomity yellow gray palette in terms of colors, and it was a little cold, and it just looked like a really sad uh kind of a sad little hospital. I want to say. And even that, and I think, obviously there's remodeling, and there's, the area is changing because cafes, liquor stores are replaced by cafes. And damn, that iced coffee is delicious. The iced coffee really did get better before we were gentrified out. um Damn, I love iced coffee. And yeah, and it sucks because it kind of feels like your area finally got better, and it got aesthetically beautiful. And the minute you want to enjoy it more, it's the minute you have to leave. And we're not exactly going up. We're not going into Beverly Hills. And in America, if white people go down, we go down even further. It's kind of like what's happening with men. It's economy. People are not getting paid as much. Not as many people are getting paid, and people are men and women, and that includes men. So what's happening, especially in terms of dating, is kind of like the killer of the provider of the killing of this theme and this kind of implicit clause that men will provide for women, especially because we are not paid equally. We are not, we still don't get the same opportunities to work like them, even though most of us are more educated. And they're kind of like, well, there's just no economy. And men, when they are broke, they are broken. And there is this resentment that shows in how they treat women, in the dynamics of dating, and this kind of idea that if they actually don't go Dutch on the date and pay for you, that it includes sex. Like there is a real lowering of the base, and I talk about it in Celibacy Vow, which is also going to come out soon. God, every episode I'm going to have it soon, but I'm really writing a lot. And I was talking about in Celibacy Vow, there is this feeling of growing isolation amongst women, in kind of men don't treat us well, and we were raised by women who, even if we loved our uncles, our fathers, our brothers, they didn't exactly treat their girlfriends or the women of the family good. And we just don't want to be that. We know men can destroy. Like my father taught me, a man can destroy you and completely walk away and live happily ever after as John Mulaney. Like it's the truth. He can cheat, he can steal your money, your energy, and just be like, bye. your time, your creativity, like your youth. Bye. And I think that, going back to Gentriletty, which is so interesting because the point is we forget about that element. Tribes do sell out tribes. There's always a case system in every group, the head and the bottom, the top and the bottom. And I think that, you know, intraracial killing and yeah, is way more prominent than interracial. Yeah, what is shown is interracial because it's almost like you prevent a group from seeing itself and healing itself enough by saying that its enemy is outside of them. And whether or not that enemy exists doesn't matter because now the top of that group can control them by never allowing them to see their wounds. And if they saw their wounds, not only would they do better for themselves, but they would do better by others. If my father had loved himself, he would have done better by me. But he hated himself, and rightfully so. He was despicable. And he only had enough fakeness to choose who he would be good to versus who he would not. And it's something that I talked about in therapy. I call it my 10 in a room theory, which is if 10 people are in a room with this one boss and the boss treats 9 people good but one absolutely viscerally maliciously, those 9 people, maybe 2 of them defend her, 2 of them say it was wrong, but all of them are always going to feel like he was a good boss. I mean, he was good to me. And I think that's the thing about Gentriletty, which I called, that Daddy Warbucks energy. She is very elegant, very graceful, looks like money, enjoys her money, and is also doing something extremely vitriolic and betraying her own community. I mean, when she tried to sell me for like, if you know about Doctores, she was like really selling, trying to get me into the hoodiest part. Like I would have been the first conquistador up in there. And the thing is, I am freaking tall. I'm tall. So like I can't, there's no hiding. There's no hiding. All right. And I, it, she would, she was in every WhatsApp group and she was everywhere, just always trying to oversell and by thousands. And she's not alone. Like when my area got gentrified even in Puerto Rico, experienced the gentrification of these areas I grew up in. It hits you even, like I said, like you go to the corner store and that soda that was $1 is now 3. And you once had it every day, now you can maybe have it once a week. Like everything catches up too, because again, your economy is not going up, everything else is, which is kind of the point. You had these white people in Brooklyn resentfully moving from wherever white people live that is wealthier. Um, and just like it really is just this, but we're not going to Beverly Hills. Vamos a decirlo. And I, it, the producer introduced me to her, and the producer is always a fascinating character because he did not like women, but he used women. And it's crazy because he's gay, or what he really is a conglomerate of a bunch of characters, like most people are in my life. And he told me, be nice to her, and you'll be able to use her too. And I did not get it. And maybe it was because we were both Latinas. It's just something that I've experienced in Mexico. I am treated more like an immigrant because of my Spanish. I talk like some people have said I talk like Bad Bunny, and it's an indication of poverty. So often, what I find is either I won't get an offer, like they just won't sell to me, or they'll sell to me at the actual price, but it's just not the same dynamic. And it's something that happens across the globe. When you are the immigrant, you are seen as taking money, and the grand irony is you're probably giving more than the expat, but the expat is treated as giving money. And that's really the difference. One is painted as a taker that actually gives, one is painted as a giver that actually takes. And I think the unpacking of the expat dynamic is this feeling of you just don't have our vibe. You don't know our history. You don't know our culture. And it's something that I describe, we're playing salsa in the BX out of our windows. And the minute, white people move in, the noise complaints go up. And the Puerto Rican flag, it has to come down. And then the milk is going up. And it's just this overwhelming kind of the neighborhood is pushing me out. And it's not becoming as nice and as beautiful and as homey as it once was with me. Even if I hated those damn yellow vomit gray walls. Um, yeah, and I think ultimately what I wanted to say with Gentriletti is that she is will always be the secret weapon to why gentrification continues, because there are people that really do live for themselves. They're often called billionaires, but sometimes they are your neighbor, and Gentriletti is the neighbor who will live out the gentrification because she was the one who started it. It's like the landlords. They hike up the prices, and it's hard to complain about somebody who's within your community. The Brutus, vamos a decir, the Brutus to your Caesar. And when I caught her trying to oversell, she still wanted to test if I was stupid, and then she blocked me. And it totally sucked because at the time I had found mold in my apartment, and I had to run. And that's how cold she is. She was just like, "Bye, bitch." I did an offer. And at the end of the day, that like my dad, they live in this mentality of, listen, I gave you a little and you're lucky. But they gave another person a lot. Like she found the producer like a $200 apartment, but he really sucked up to her because he was complaining about that. I gotta take this bitch out to dinner. Like he took her out to dinner, all that stuff. Like he really had to put on the works. And I always felt that I have never been a good fake person, which is one of my biggest resentments of all the things I got out of my father. Like apparently I got his feet. I didn't get his fakeness. Like you could tell when I don't like somebody. And I am incredibly clear when I feel like someone is playing me, which sucks. I guess it's good. It's good to be honest because it weeds out the losers, right? But I was like, that's not true. Like that's just not what an apartment costs. And I know wherever I go, I look for the hood to avoid it. I am not Becca, who is always asking, "Can we go to the hood?" No, I avoid hoods. What? Not me. I'm not going there. Um, and I think it turned her off because she only offered to help me because the producer asked. And then the minute I had like demands, like I don't want to pay $2,500 for the doctor's apartment, she just, well, she got disgusted with me and kind of showed her colors. And the producer obviously gossiped about me, and that's another story. Um, but long story short, Gentriletti, I can honestly say, is the reason why Mexico is getting gentrified. Like she really is doing it single handedly, and I think that a flawed system will always thrive off of flawed characters. And one of the things that I always tell people, we use this word like government, and it sounds really big and it sounds industrial and almost like something like the David to your Goliath. But Goliath was a man too, and governments are just a batch of human beings running things and telling you what you can or can't do with your own life. And there's a return to power and a return to essence when you realize that. My father was just a human being, and my mother made me forgive way too much BS um because he had the title, and he may not have earned it. He may have done everything to destroy it, but he still had it. And he's the only father I will ever know. And I think, and I landed on that in the end. It taught me how to feel unsafe with someone. It taught me how to erase my boundaries. And it taught me this idea that if you are nice to a malicious person, they might be nicer to you. And at the end of the day, what my father, I will always note with his behavior is when he wanted to impress you, he wanted to impress you. I felt from like the beginning that Gentriletty was being fake. And maybe that's why fake people don't like me. I may not be able to be fake, but I certainly know who is. Um and it's so crazy. I entertained her a little too long because in the end I just knew she wasn't going to help me. You could tell when a fake person likes somebody or wants to impress. And it's something I talked about. It goes back to colonization. And I always tell people colonization is a mentality, it is not a particular person, it's a particular mindset. And the colonization mentality, it doesn't have a look. I mean, obviously, historically, it has way more looks than others, but I mean, everywhere you go, even right now, slavery is at its utmost highest, human slavery, human trafficking. And it's because colonization is a human mindset that runs on this idea I either fetishize you or I make you forgotten. You either mix with me or you're murdered. And she murdered me and mixed with the producer. And I could just tell immediately, like, oh, she's not going to save me. She's not going to help me. I'm either going to die in that mold or I have to just keep looking on my own. And I did. So happy ending for me, I guess. But you could always tell when somebody wants to impress you, whether it's out of fakeness or or whatever. You just know. And I think part of the reason why I entertained her is that idea. I was just so used to being unsafe and allowing people to make me unsafe that I stay. And now I'm just learning not to. So that's a tricky episode, isn't it? I mean, I hope I don't get hate comments, but that's what happened. That's what I feel. And ooh, I hope I try to be as graceful as I could be, but that is my story of gentrification and my perspectives. And check out daddyrecovery.com. And I hope you laugh with Gentriletty. I'm sure you have a Gentriletty by you. Or worse, you are her.